No, I think it's the running costs. I mean, look at jet fuel, which is up to 80% of the cost of running an airline. And you've seen the price of fuel. I mean, we felt it ourselves in motor vehicles. The same thing has happened with jet fuel as well as avgas. Comair plans use jet fuel, which have gone up 33% in a few months. So there's, when you have a situation in South Africa's economy where a lot of these aviation companies are emerging from the effect of COVID, it's like a double whammy where they come out of it and suddenly the cost of fuel, their main running cost, goes up substantially.
Surely the Comair management should have known that. I mean, what could have possibly led them to, selling ticket prices too cheap in order to pursue market share?
Well, I think it's a cash flow problem that your commentator during the news break pointed out. What he's talking about is cash flow, and they have a cash flow squeeze. They have investment capital to use on running costs, but they've obviously run out of that cash. So I think your point is made. The question has to be asked of management. Surely they saw the amount of money they were spending, the cash flow in, cash flow out. It's a daily running expense. There's a balance that you run on a daily basis when you run companies, and especially aviation, airlines. They watch that balance all the time. They're highly aware of every cent they're spending, virtually minute to minute. So you've got to ask a question of what happened. Why was what happened to the monitoring of that cash flow expense? And secondly, to alert passengers in the way that they have is kind of unacceptable, I'm afraid to say. It may be legal under IATA rules and our own commercial rules in South Africa, but it's not a way to gather future passengers when they do run, take off from this challenge, the suspension as they call it.
Desmond, remember that the company went into business rescue back in May 2020. Do you get a sense that the company has fully recovered from that? And is this perhaps one of the reasons why the company is still struggling?
Now, I've been watching Comair for years, like most of us who look at aviation. They've been a really strong, powerful company, and one of the oldest brands actually in Africa in terms of aviation. Yes. At the same time, I've been watching the sense of disquiet over the last 5 years in particular. They run into a number of issues when it comes to the financial management. And in fact, the board has changed as well as the executive based on what I'm saying here. So something is not going right there. And then you put that in conjunction with the suspension with 4 separate technical issues earlier this year, just as they came out of this. And there's a sign there. You don't have to be an aviation scientist or a rocket scientist to figure out that there's something not going right with Comair's management and principle of how they're operating. Whatever they're saying publicly is separate from the reality here. There's been a number of issues at Kalula over the last few months that are unacceptable if you're running a company.
Surely the company saw this coming. The fact that they've been in financial crisis, it's been a long time coming. And the fact that the company only notified its employees, staff and customers only last night of the cancellation, it leaves a lot to be desired. Why would the company do that?
It's very hard to say. I'm not privy to the information that they received, but at the same time, as I've said, I'm taking flights all the time like you and others in this business that we have. And, other companies are very good at proactively informing their customers of any changes, even when it's minutes or change in the gate. They send you SMSs. They alert you all the time, their competitors. So I just think that Comair has been suffering from a very old business model, and they don't seem to have turned the corner when it comes to how they're, in principle, managing an airline in the 21st century in 2022, where you have to keep communicating with your passengers and your staff. This is not back in the day. This is where we have social media. A lot of damage can be done to you very, very quickly if you're not proactive, as you say. So, I'm not privy to information behind the scenes about what exactly happened, who spoke to who inside the organization. But just as a person watching aviation and airlines in operation, my eyes have widened consistently over the last few months as they came out of business rescue. They've made, to be quite blunt, one mistake after another.
It's a known fact that so many companies, especially the aviation industry, were hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, and most of them did not fully recover from it. So can international companies or airlines step in to fill the void left by local airliners should they not survive?
That's what's been worrying me as a Southern African. SADC is a growing part of the world. We've got half a billion people living in part of the DRC and below in SADC region. This is a huge number of people in a growing marketplace. And we do not want people running these airlines from Emirates and Qatar Airways, which is what's happening. The relationship building between us and Ethiopian Airlines, for example, Southern Africans and Ethiopian, or even the statement of SAA working with Kenyan Airlines, for example, as another thing about African airlines, working together is to be welcomed, because we need corridors that are close by. That's how commerce works. And so saying that people will fill the vacuum made by this is happening to some extent, but you must also realize the competitors, Airlink and FlySafair in particular, are stealing or eating Comair and SAA's lunch. And they've been signing deals across Southern Africa consistently through the lockdown and up to the present. So, it's about nature of boring a vacuum. What's happened is that these companies are run effectively and they've recognized that there's opportunities. So no, I'm not as negative to saying that outsiders will come and run our airlines. Insiders are running them. We have Comair, we have Airlink, and we have FlySafair that are making money out of running an airline properly and are being competitive. They have people running these things who actually know what they're doing, and they've signed deals across from flights that extend to Zanzibar, across Southern Africa. So it's very exciting watching how the aviation sector is coming out of this. But if we do not continue, if these companies, the other companies such as SAA and Cluda, don't give us more competition so the ticket prices go down, then others will enter into the equation that are further afield, and not in our national interest, to be quite blunt as well.
Indeed, you've mentioned competition, which is one element of this discussion. And I suppose then government should also play its part. Do you think that the government is playing its part in terms of supporting local airlines? And should the government aid be distributed pro rata to ensure, well, according to an airline's market share?
No. What the government should do is they should make it the road available, or the airways available for people to run it who know what they're doing, as they've done in Ethiopia. Ethiopia as a state-owned airline that the government doesn't run. It owns it, but it lets people who run the airline know what they're doing. So that's the answer here in South Africa. It's a very clear model that works across the world. Swissair went broke precisely because of the government interference. And I won't bore you with the details, but every Ital Air is another Italian airlines, where government interferes in operations of a commercial entity, it fails in the long term. In the short term, you can bail yourself out with the taxpayers' money, but in the long term, you better know what you're doing to make a profit out of operating an effective business, whether you're doing an airline or doing aluminium smelting. It makes no difference. So that's the bottom line here is no. Government has no role directly in funding or subsidizing this. We live in a commercial entity, a global entity. We are competing with Emirates and Lufthansa and Qantas and these carriers who have their national government supporting them, but they butt out of running it day to day. In South Africa, we've had a situation develop since 2007-8 in particular, where government began to take over running it through deployees. That's not the way to function a business such as an airline, which is highly technical. You have to let the airline get on with it. The second thing I must say is that some of the state-owned entities around the aviation sector have shown weaknesses recently. AXA, for example, ATNS, which runs the air traffic control, for example. There have been issues there as well. On the 13th of last month, ATNS shut down high-level reporting, and we turned into a non-controlled airspace, like over parts of Africa that are undeveloped. Why did that happen? How is that allowed to happen? This is a state-owned entity. So aviation and aviators like me are asking questions about this, saying government must understand that it creates the landscape to operate, but it does not operate itself inside the sector. It's a disaster if that happens. So that's my long answer to you, I'm afraid, Simpiwe.